much, and thank you for coming. And before we start the story, I thought I'd read out a couple of messages from Marrakech, from people that are working there. To Sarah Corbett, who has been trading Marrakech for about 20 years and is a force of nature herself. It would appear that we're being recorded. Yes, sorry. Yes, you have to wait for that all to come up. And is it on Facebook Live?
As far as I know, we're live.
Live, perfect. Sarah Corbett, who flew out on Thursday and will undoubtedly by now have moved mountains to mountains, and because she's that kind of person. And so she sent this message, and it's about the Henna Cafe. I'm currently in Morocco assisting with earthquake relief. The Henna Cafe team have overcome several obstacles in the past week, yet delivered delicious and nutritious meals in greater quantities day on day. And I know it was 820 meals that went out day before yesterday around to the hospital and to a daily supply of every day for those who are affected by the earthquake here in Morocco. A daily supply of meals has been sent to those who are injured and in hospital, as meals are not provided in Moroccan hospitals. In addition to this, displaced people have gathered in various places in Marrakech, and we've responded by delivering meals to them. The meals are delivered by bicycle. They link up with a local bicycle charity, and let the meals go. Sadly, the Henna Cafe premises have been deemed unfit to use, so we've moved several times in response to situations on the ground. Despite this, along with the personal aspects of the earthquake and the Henna Cafe time, they have worked tirelessly to help others. They should be extremely proud of their achievements. Currently, they're working from the World Storytelling Cafe in Marrakech. Thanks you to everyone who's gathered in Gloucester tonight to support this important work. And a message from Mike Wood, who's chair of the British Moroccan Association. Many of you have met him who were in Marrakech, who him and his wife Lucy are sort of behind the website and the cafe and probably everything else in the world. A message from Mike Wood. I'd like to thank the storytellers who have gathered in the UK tonight to support our work in Morocco. The strong connection between the storytellers of Morocco, of the world, and Morocco is evident and appreciated. Within 10 days, we've seen great and positive changes. People power is very best. On the ground here in Morocco, we are working hard to turn the story of nature's extreme power into a story of human connections. The positive response from so many people is a great opening chapter. Thank you all for being part of the process. Two kingdoms, one heart. I've got, and Kamal, who some of you met in Marrakech as a young storyteller and poet, wrote this poem for me to read out tonight. Marrakech loves you. The love of Marrakech extends between our hearts. It passes through the courtyard. Fragrance touches its gardens, roses. Coloured by the colour of Marrakech, its markets make you love to discover, to sip tea, and inhale the popular foods. The dialogues and alleys of Marrakech are a symphony that sings the most beautiful melodies. The Kutubia Mosque, with its harmonious history, with churches, Marrakech, whose heart accommodates all religions, races, customs, and ethnicities, these days were cloudy and rainy. Sadness, destruction, diaspora, tears, candles extinguished, but this red rose will emerge. It will shine. Its luster will return. Her wounds will heal. Its letters will be formed, and they will become words and words. She expresses steadfastness, and resistance. She will send that ray of her love again, and the stories and poems will return. Marrakech is a home of the arts. It fascinates hearts. Marrakech kisses you in the morning. It touches you everywhere. You remember passing through here. She told you.
No.
Mike Rust. Thank you.
Good evening, folks. How are you? So, I brought this along. My connection with all this is I run a Zoom account for the World's Storytelling Cafe, where we all through the lockdowns and everything, we did it once a fortnight. And it was just trying to keep everybody in touch with everybody, and it was all just run out of Marrakech. And I went over there, and it's some of the nicest people I've ever come across in my life. My family are a local family, so my surname's Rust, and when Dad left to fly Spitfires years and years ago, he never actually came back to live in Gloucester, but they lived one end of Tupley Avenue and they lived the other end of Tupley Avenue, and I'm talking about my family. So we always saw this as the family home. And the thing we always knew about Gloucester was, if you opened up, do you remember a thing called a telephone book with all the names in it? Before all these sort of mobile phones and all that like that. You open up the one for Shropshire, which is where I live now. There's one for me, one for my brother, and one for my cousin. You come down to Gloucester, there's like 3 pages. And so when we all meet together, you know, what do you call a gathering where there's 7 Miss or Mrs. Rusts all in the same place? Coven wasn't quite the word. And various things like that. But over there in the background there, it's my cousin Gabriel, and she still lives down here. And her father was a fella called Uncle Charles, we called him, and he had a long face safari Land Rover in his 60s. And because he flew Wellington bombers, he had converted the front of it into a Wellington bomber. And all we wanted him to do was to go up and down Birdlip Hill so we could watch the altimeter go up and go back down again. And the other thing he did was, which I'm sure you can't do nowadays, because I'm sure it would be banned by somebody. He put a deck chair in the back and we had some bamboo sticks. And I used to be a tail end Charlie. And I used to drive around Gloucester shooting at policemen. The thing's changed nowadays. Is that the policemen used to shoot back because they'd go bang, 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 and all those things. But the other thing Charles did was, if you go up the Stroud Road and you go along to the beach and up there, there's a village up there called Paradise. You know do you know the name of the pub in Paradise? The name of the pub in Paradise was the Adam and Eve. Right, and you're looking at the little boy who had an ice cream with Adam and Eve in Paradise. Now, I did say I'd kick it off with some local stories, John, so I'm going to do this one. Robinswood Hill. You all know about Robinswood Hill, and you all know the king of the fairies lives under Robinswood. He's lived there for years and years. Now, for some strange reason, and I don't know where this came from, it's all these scientists and historians and archaeologists and the internet and everything else. And some bloody called Darwin, right? He reckons that if you plant a bit of seed in the ground, that produces a flower. or a tree or a plant or something like that. Now we all know that's rubbish, right? So what happens is you plant something in the ground, a fairy comes from underneath and pulls it down and has a look at it and goes, oak tree. And they bring along an oak tree and they just push it up from underneath, right? Now everybody knows this. Now this is, I've been in my family and the Russell family have been knowing this for years and years and years. Now the king of the fairies, as he lives there, and every Midsummer's Eve, they have a competition. And the competition is for the curliest beard that you've ever seen in your life. Now, Keith and John have got no chance, right? They would be stuck with the beginners round the corner because they've got no chance. And this, by the way, in case anybody hasn't heard this bit of proper gospel culture, we're talking about the women as well as the men. Right? Because the women, they had really proper, like yours, Mum, your curly hair and everything. Now, their beards were a lot kind. They're just the same as you, but you have a great big beard. Comes down here as well. It would suit you nicely. You want to try something? No, so there's places where we can get one done for you. Don't worry about it. Okay. Now, the king of the fairies, right? He lives under Robbinswood Hill. Now, if you've got a fairy on your farm up in the Cotswolds, it's a really nice piece of work because what they do is that when the cows are all milking, they bring all the cows to the gate and all the hens lay all the eggs in one place. So you don't have to run around and chase for eggs all over the place and everything else. They're just all in one place. And when the sheep need shearing, they just stand in a queue, right? And all sorts of things. And the horses, well, they're horses, they talk to the fairies and they can jump anything. Where do you think Cheltenham races started from? Cheltenham races, because we've got some of the best horses you've ever seen. Because when everybody goes home and these race horses are up on the high Cotswolds or something, the fairies come and talk to them and they say, run faster and things like that. You know, they give them good advice and things like that. Now up there, not so long ago, there was a guy who was doing all the work on his farm and his old mum. Well, his old mum died. Well, there's been a thing on the TV today about, back in the 80s, apparently, all the women used to stay in the house and do all the cooking and cleaning and everything. And all the men used to go and do all the work, and they've changed it. Well, that's going back for years and years and years. He was all right doing all the work on the farm, but when it came to doing anything like in the house, he was absolutely hopeless, you see. So he was sat there and he went to a wise woman, something. Like, this is Jan just coming, she's the wisest woman I know. Right? And they were, and the advice she got was this: it was easy. You're not going to survive without a good woman. A good woman is what you need. And he went, a good woman? And he went, yeah. A good woman for you, one will make you happy, two will make you content, three would make you laugh from time to time, four would stop you drinking too much in the pub every bloody night, and five, why don't you try it just for a change? And he went, all right, then where do I get a woman from? She says, it's easy, go down the British Flag in Gloucester. Now, the British Flag used to be a pub around the corner, just as on the way to the doctor. It's not a pub anymore. Well, what do I do there? Well, you go into the back of the British Flag, and that's where all the women who want a husband sit. And you go in there and you have a look around and you say, well, you know, hello, or so, but you don't bother with all that kind of stuff. You just ask one of them if they want to drink or not. And then, depending on the answer is depending on whether you get to ask them to be a wife. Because if they say, I drink 3 gin and tonics an hour, that's the last one you want. Right? Now, a nice glass of red wine, right? Just one every sort of 3 hours or so, you know, you probably pulled yourself about 2,000 acre farmer, you would. None of this extravagance or anything like that. He says, is that all there is to it? And he went, yeah. So he came down to Gloucester and he went into the bar and he looked there and she had all the wobbly bits in the right wobbly place, you know, and all the other bits and everything else. And he said, can I buy you a drink? And she said, yeah. Can I have half a pint of cider, please? He went, cider? That's not even beer. That's even cheaper than bloody beer. Cider is. No, bloody do. He said, oh, he said, just how many do you drink an hour? And she said, well, I have about 2 a week. And he went, right, that's that sorted. Will you marry me? It was easy back in the day. It really was a lot easier back in the day. So they got all the arrangements. They popped into the cathedral, got himself married, and he took him back up onto the hills, you see. And he started working on the farm and everything else. But she was a city girl. She'd come from the docks in the middle of Gloucester, down where the canal comes in and all the rest of it. And he told her about feeding the fairies, who comes and does all the work. And he said, well, what do you do? Well, when we get the cream from the milk, you've got to leave it outside the back door. And when we get the first of everything, leave some for the fairy. And so when we make cheese, just leave a bit for the cheese. Everything, the first bit, the first egg, whatever's first, leave it outside. Okay? Because that's what they do at Winchcombe with the big. Well, the Duke lives down in Winchcombe. He doesn't actually do it himself. He gets his servants to do it, which is where the king goes every morning. See? And that'll make the fairies' beards all curly. Well, as long as you treat them right, the birds are all curly. And when they stand there in a row and they have a big judging on Midsummer's Eve, just as the sun's coming up in the morning, they'll know that they've got a good farmer and good people to look after, or bad ones, by the state of the bloody beards, you see. Oh, he said. But she hadn't been doing it, you see, because she was the one that took all that instead of giving it away to the fairies. She said, the fairies down there, who's heard of fairies? You know? Shh. Anyway, suddenly all things was going wrong. All the cows were at the wrong end, and there's eggs lying around all over the place. There was no air in the tyres. You know, and also everything was going wrong. But he didn't notice, and suddenly he looked in the sky, and there, the sun was going up. And he suddenly realised it was going to be Midsummer's Eve. And he thought for a moment, and a bolt, you know, when something hits you in the tummy, and you really go leaden and everything else, it just suddenly hit him. They hadn't been looking after the fairies. So he went rushing back in and he said, have you been looking after the fairy? He went round the corner, and where there should have been some cream, there was just a bit of watered down milk. He said, what happened to the cheese you made? She said, oh, I ate that. Oh, and he said, that's it, we're going to be disgraced. Every time our fairy's going to go to under Robinswood Hill, and he's going to all these curly beards and everything else, and ours, they're going to laugh at him, and they're going to go, you've got people that don't look after you. Ho, 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 ho. And fairies hate people laughing at them. It's the one thing you do, you never laugh. If you fall out with them, just, if you want to fall out with them, laugh at them. Do it the other way around. Okay. And he said, she said, well, I didn't believe you. He said, well, you should have believed me. And they had a row. Anyway, she burst into tears. She said, well, I didn't know. She said, what are we going to do? He said, there's only one thing we can do. We're going to have to sell the farm and buy a new one. We're going to go away somewhere. Because if we stay here, everything's going to go wrong with us for years and years and years. So I'm going to sell the farm tomorrow. We're going to put all the stuff on the back of the car. And we're going to go somewhere. We'll go up the Welsh Marsh somewhere. We'll go up through Herefordshire, up into Shropshire, up into the hills up there. Right? Okay? And she said, you sure? And he went, yes, I'm sure. And she thought for a minute and went, can we just go and hide in the forest to do that? And he went, well, I suppose. There's no one to catch in the forest to do. She said, well, that is Gloucestershire. Right? And it's a lovely place in the autumn, and I like living there. Why don't we just go down there and we buy a smaller place with some trees? And by the way, it looks like there's going to be 3 of us in the spring. And he went, right, he said, okay, that's what we'll do. So they sold up everything and they stuck it in the car and they came down and they went over the bridge and over, like you do. You always got to say that when you go over the bridge and over. You can't say it in any other way, all right? You go over the bridge and over and going down to Newent and off that way. And she turned around and went, well, we won't have to worry about fairies anymore, that's least. And the voice from the back went, where you go, I'm coming. And they looked round and there was a little fairy. And he was sat there and he had the mankiest, horriblest beard you've ever seen in your life. And he was sat there with a big smile on his face. And he said, I've been listening to you too. I'm sure you won't get it wrong again. But why don't we all go and live in the forest together? So that's what they did. Now, as the modern times are coming with the internet and Google and all those other bits, and all those posh people have been buying everything up and they've been from away and everything else. More and more of the fairies have been leaving up there and they've been drifting off into the forest of Dean. Because the Dean is quite a strange place to this day. Now, it's where this world meets the next world. It's where at a funeral in the middle of October and in the middle of January, all the flowers will come up. Because every time a flower comes up in the winter, that means a fairy is standing there because they want to see what was happening. And it will come one day and it will disappear the next. And the Dean is a place you can still get lost in. And it is one of my favourite places in the whole of the world. I'll just finish off. I brought it all the way from Shropshire. So I'll finish off by playing a couple of tunes, or a tune maybe. And what it is a nickel harper. And they say, we're having this conversation, the lady over there, about where it comes from. Well, the people who I've been with all weekend, they reckon it came over on the Saxon boats. They reckon it came over to Linda's farm and all that. And that's the way that the Saxons used to entertain themselves. Whether they've got any proof or not is a different point, but the Germans don't agree with them, and the French don't agree with them, and the Italians don't agree with them. But there is a guy on the Isle of Man, and he thinks it's gone. Thank you for listening, and thank you for all the people out there in Zoom world and all the rest of it. And I run a storytelling round for the World Storytelling Cafe on a Sunday evening between 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock UK time. And everybody who's listening to me and everybody who's looking at me, you're all very welcome to come and tell a story.
And that's this Sunday, isn't it?
Yes.
Where?
Zoom. World Storytelling
World
Cafe.
Worldstorytellingcafe.com. Okay.
How you want it?
That is what I wanted, but that was brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, you can come back. Oh, sometime, you know, I'll let you back.
Well, that's very kind. Yeah, all right.
Right. I'm glad I'm not following that. But you are Safi Pinsel. Ladies and gentlemen, did I get that right? Whoa, what did I get wrong?
I'm Snell Pim.
Snell Pin. Snell Pin.
But tonight,
Pim
Safi
Snell, yes.
Snell.
Scarlet Pim
Pin.
Snell.
Three. Snell. Well, give her a round of applause.
So, in my family, hedgehogs are really, really important. As in, like, they are almost household gods, as it were. They represent home, cooking, etc. So, my dad had a wealth of different hedgehog stories. And one of the ones I've chosen for you tonight is his version of a story called Hans My Hedgehog. Now, there are lots of different versions of this, and this is my dad's version. So back when there was still the wild woods, and it was a place of thin places where the magic could touch this world, there was a lowly farmer who lived in a not too small house and was married to a lovely farmer's wife. And, you know, they even had nice, fine clothing from the market that came to visit the local town. And though they'd had 10 wonderful years, something was missing and they were not content. There was an empty cradle and it sat there. And there was a longing and a hoping, and the farmer began to worry, for he saw that there was a sadness in his wife's eyes. And often he caught her staring at the cradle with this kind of half-gone glaze. She was still smiley and happy and all the rest of it, but he felt this fear of where this could go. And one night, well, some say it was her that uttered fateful words, but I think it was him, because I think the farmer went to the town and met up with his other farmer friends and the farrier and what have you, and they were all sitting there, and they were in the tavern, and they were having one too many ales and what have you, and getting very merry, and then they were all telling these stories about the sort of shenanigans their children had got up to. And this plucked something deep within him, and it scarred him deeply, so that when he was wending his way home, he cried out, "Oh, for a child, any child, a child of my own, even a hedgehog." And this was at the edge of the forest. And the forest was a thin place, a place where there are ears that some say shouldn't be listening. Some say these ears are tricksters. I say, how can such old beings understand truly what it is like to be mortal? They do exactly what we ask, but what we ask for isn't necessarily what we need or what we think we have asked for. And it appeared that they were listening. And it's like, was it a wish? Was it a prayer? It was a desperation. When he got home, that night, that very night, his wife was giving birth. And he was like, oh! And out popped this half-made thing. And most people wouldn't have recognized it, because you see, hedgehogs are not born prickly. They are not born furry. They are born as pink wriggly things. And this creature that was lying there, the farmer recognized it. He was like, "Oh, my hedgehog!" And they picked it up because it had no spines yet. It was soft and warm. It was a baby, but it couldn't see. Its eyes were covered. And it had 2 human legs, but little poor hands. But finally, they had a baby, and they were happy while they were together in their not so small cottage. But obviously, you know, you do need to go to town, you need to go to market. And the baby was growing up and needed supplies, so off they went. And those friends who had previously teased the farmer about not having a baby looked at this baby with its snout and its new little quills starting to push out of the skin. And they hated it. They made fun of it. And the farmer felt a tug at his heart and began to resent the baby. And to the point that he didn't want to take it out in public. And this was heartbreaking for everyone involved. But Hans, the hedgehog, was christened after the farmer had an argument with the priest. And it was Hans, my hedgehog, because it was half a hedgehog. And as he grew, his spines got pricklier and harder. And the farmer, to his frustration, found that he couldn't smack Hans because prickly hands, prickly spikes. And he just basically tried to ignore the existence of this child that he had wished for. And this was very, very sad. And Hans was very, very aware of it. One day, you know, it was all going okay, but one day the farmer came home early from the fields and he saw all the sheets hung up on the line. And one of them was nothing but tatters and ruins with the sunlight shining through all these little holes. He came in and he said, "It's no good. It's no good. They were right in town. He cannot sleep on a normal bed. He's just destroying the linen." So he got a load of straw and threw it behind the fireplace. He was like, Hans, my hedgehog, that is where you sleep now. Well, this meant the atmosphere in the house got even more dismal. And when the next market came to town, the farmer asked, wife, do you want anything from the market? And she was like, I want some new linen for Hans, my hedgehog's bed. And Hans said, no, mother, it is time, I think, that I should leave the house. Father, buy me a set of bagpipes at the market. Take the rooster and have it shod. Put little shoes on it so that I may ride it. And then I will leave. And his mother was like, you can't leave, you're so very, very small. And he didn't even come up to the waist on his father. But his father was, oh, thank goodness for that. And he went to market. But even though his heart had been turned so hard by other people's comments on his child, the child he had wished for, there was still love in there. So when he went and got little shoes put on the cockerel, he also got a little saddle made so that Hans would have a nice saddle for riding the rooster. And then he had to find the bagpipes. Up and down the market he went, looking for the bagpipes. Could he find bagpipes? No. And the day was drawing on and he wanted to go and have a beer with his friends and it wasn't going to happen. And then right at the edge, just by the woods, he saw a little old man playing the bagpipes. I was like, oh, can I buy these off of you? And the little old man was like, don't know about that. And he was so wrinkled that he actually looked like he was carved from a tree. But the farmer's like, no, that can't be right. And he just kept offering him more and more money. And the little old man was like, no. What I need is the milk from one of your cows for 1 whole year. The farmer's like, sure, okay, that sounds like a bargain. So he exchanged milk from one cow for a whole year for these bagpipes. And then it must have been because it had been such a long day, but he could have sworn the little old man jigged off to the wood and turned into a giant hedgehog. But that can't have been right. He must have been very, very tired. So he returned home with the bagpipes and the cockerel with the saddle and little shoes. And when he got home, he discovered his wife had not only packed the biggest packed dinner for little Hans with all of his favourite foods in it, but she'd also selected the best pigs from the pigsty to go with him. Wisely, the farmer chose not to argue with her about this. And he did feel a pang of sadness as he watched his little boy leave. And off Hans the Hedgehog went, riding through the village, onto the town, and out into the woods. And this is when the woods were old. And there were big, massive oaks, much wider than I can stretch my arms, the sort that have hollows in them that you can hide in. And he found one of these at the very middle of the woods. And this is where he decided he and his pigs and the rooster would live. It was great. There was acorns on the ground and the biggest truffle mushrooms you can imagine. And the pigs liked them. And so did the hedge pig. I mean, after all, he is a hedge pig. He's a hedgehog, hedge pig. Gotta love a truffle. So that is where he lived for several years, playing his bagpipes. Until one day, a king had gone out with a hunting party because there was rumours now that there were all these wild pigs living in the woods and they were going there to hunt them. But he'd got separated from his hunting party. And then he lost his horse. So he's just wandering around the woods and it's getting dark and he's a king and he's scared and he's the king and he's calling for his men and they're not coming. And then he hears the music and he sees this creature and he's scared. But Hans, the hedgehog, gives him a bowl of stew, and it is the best mushroom stew you can imagine. It is so delectable that the king never ever tasted anything as good as this ever again. He ate the stew and he slept by the fire. And the next morning, Hans took him to the edge of the woods to his kingdom, where he could see his kingdom. And he says to Hans, I will grant you anything. Just let me know what you want. And this wasn't a real promise. This was, the king was scared of this half hedgehog, half human. And he wanted to keep him sweet until he got home to his castle. So Hans said, the first creature you meet on your return to your castle, that is what I want. The king says, sure, I will write you a note. And the king assumed that because Hans was half hedgehog and that half of him that was hedgehog was his head, that he wouldn't be bright enough to read. He wouldn't know. So he wrote a note saying that this was an enemy of state and was to be killed on sight. Of course, Hans knew exactly what the note said, but he took it anyway, because he believed that people need second chances. And off the king went, and Hans went back to his oak tree. And then the next night, another king turns up, wandering, lost in the woods. And it was like, this time he'd gone on a bit of an explorer and had got lost because he'd heard there were these interesting pigs in the woods with tusks, right? So he'd gone to see what they were all about. And again, Hans gives him a bowl of soup, and he sleeps by the fire. And the next day, Hans takes him back. And this time, the king is genuinely grateful. And is like, yeah, sure, you can have the first creature that greets me, because he knew that the first creature that was going to greet him was going to be his faithful hunting dog. And a good dog as she was, the hedgehog was welcome to her because he had been so helpful. So off the king went home. The next night, another king, because A, kings are not that bright and tend to get lost a lot, and B, kings like to turn up in threes for some reason, not sure why, but they do. So, you know, along comes this other king, comes along, he's lost as well. This time he was just out for a walk. He didn't know about the pigs at all, but he did know about truffles, and he was like, oh, truffle soup, oh, yum, yum, yum. And he was really excited to meet Hans and spoke to him about his music and adventures and all the sorts of things about the woods. He wanted to know everything. And he again, when he was taken to the edge of the woods, he said, what can I give you? And Hans said to him as well, the first creature that you meet. That is what I want. And the king's like, yeah, sure, fine. This king was completely not worried. Don't know if he was a bit dim or if he was genuinely laid back, or he could actually see that Hans had a good heart. But off he went. Now, Hans was like, right, that's it, I'm getting married. So he writes a letter to his dad and says, I'm coming back with like the pigs and the piglets and all the rest of it. And you guys, all the people in the village and the town, you can have as many of them as you want and do what you want with them. Okay? But they are trained to find truffles. So off he goes to go home because he wants to get ready for his wedding. And he arrives home and he's like, here are all the pigs. And Dad, I need some new shoes for the cockerel. And Dad's like, the farmer's like, yes, okay, right. I thought you were dead because you'd been gone for like years in the woods and you're like my height now. But yes, I will go and put some new shoes on your rooster. Because not only had Hans grown, but the rooster had. It was massive, absolutely huge. I would say it was a huge cock, but I'm not quite sure that people will understand that I'm talking about the chicken. So, beautiful, beautiful bird. And his dad takes it off and gets new shoes put on it and a new saddle. Beautiful scroll work on the leather and everything. Perfect for a wedding. And Hans rides out with, 1 or 2 pigs left. And off he goes to the first castle. And he arrives. And of course, the soldiers have been told to expect him and to kill him before he even gets the letter out. But Hans knows this, and his cockerel does not have clipped wings, so it can fly, and it flies up onto the buttress of the castle, and then from there into the window of the king's chamber. And there he arrives, and the king is so fearful because he sees the anger glittering in that hedgehog's eyes. And he is so fearful that he's just like, here's my daughter, take her. But she could not hide her disgust for a half hedgehog, half human. Hans gave her 3 nights to sort this out. But she stomped her feet. She did not want to go. He explained about the truffles. She was like, maybe we can make this work because truffles were worth more than their weight in gold. And he thought, this could work. She thought this. And she came slyly. And he was like, no, she is not changing her way. So as they were leaving, he dumped her on the side of the road with a pig. And he said, do what you will with the pig, but it is trained to find truffles. And off he went with her carriage. She followed the pig home and then had it slaughtered because I don't think she understood what he was saying, or she was just a nasty piece of work, just like her dad. But on they went to the second kingdom. Hans the hedgehog, like 1 pig and his cockerel, and the horses that pull the carriage. And he turns up, and this king has been waiting for him and has thrown a banquet. This is the thank you banquet because he is genuinely thankful. But he feels the dread because he does not want Hans the hedgehog to take his daughter. So he lies and says, it's the dog, my faithful hunting dog who always comes to greet me. And Hans is like, really? And those hedgehog eyes were so intense that the king crumbled and confessed that he had lied. And he was devastated, and he explained to his daughter, and his daughter was like, no, okay, you promised, I will go with him. But she was scared of Hans the hedgehog, but she tried so hard to go and be his bride, but she couldn't get over the spikes and all the rest of it, but she tried so hard, and Hans was like, I will not take your fear for love. I cannot marry you. This isn't right. So she got to go back to her dad with a bag of truffle spores for the oak trees that grew in the castle grounds, because she had tried so hard, and that king, he told a lie, but he had genuinely been thankful to Hans. So on they went to the third kingdom with the laid-back king, who might not have been that bright, but might just have been laid back. And he got there, and again they're waiting for him, and this time there is a wedding planned, because his daughter, when she was told, was like, hedgehog, this sounds interesting. I just want to know about this. And you say he plays music. Well, that sounds interesting. And she just spent 3 days and 3 nights talking Hans' ear off, asking him question after question after question. How did you end up as a hedgehog? Have you always been a hedgehog? What are you doing? And she laughed at the antics of the dog and the tricks of the pig. And she even rode the rooster into the woods and went and saw his oak tree, and it was all fabulous. And she's like, this is great. And then they got married. And it turned out that those quills, it was a coat all along. And Hans could choose to take it off. I mean, he always had a bit of hedgehog about his face. But when he took his coat off, it was the softest thing because he laid it inside out. It was the softest, bestest thing. And they lived happily ever after with the dog that they trained to hunt the truffles. Because pigs, when they hunt truffles, they eat most of the truffles they find. But dogs don't eat the truffles, but they do still dig them up for you. It's a fantastic arrangement. And yeah, that's Hans the Hedgehog.
Thank you. Now, if I forget this next bloke's name, it's going to kill me. I've only known him 3,576 years. So it's Shane. Ladies and gentlemen, Shane is.
The hard thing is to work out which story to tell. But so I don't really have a connection with Gloucester other than a little nursery rhyme. I'm sure you've heard many a time that I've told my girls when they were young. Foster went to Gloucester in a shower of rain. He stepped in a puddle right up to his middle and never went back there again. So
told, terrible.
yes, some things never change. So I think I'm going to tell my current sort of favourite story to tell, and it's a traveller story, and it's about a basket maker. Well, that was what he did in one part of the year, in the early part of the year. He would go down the country lane and he would take out his trusty knife, which was an old penknife, rusty, well worn. The rivet was broken. It was taped. It was quite blunt, and he would cut the young withies, the young bits of willow, to take home to make his baskets for his wife to go hawking for him with the baskets. There he was one day. He was pushing this knife through because it's hard work with a blunt knife. Eventually got himself a little bundle and picked the bundle up, and he was just about to walk home, and this voice said, "Excuse me." There was no one there, and he went to walk. "Excuse me." He said, "Down here." And he looked down, and there was a little ferryman. And the little ferryman said, "I've got a job for you." He said, "I want you to make a little cradle for the fairy lady." Oh, the basket maker. If only I could. I would never find withies fine enough to make a cradle for a tiny little fairy lady. "Take me home to your wife," said the little fairyman. Okay, he said, "Hop on." The little fairyman jumped on his little bundle of withies and walked him down the lane to their little camp. Went in. "Hello, darling," said his wife. "Oh, I see you in a nice armful of withies." "Yes, yes." He said, "I'll make some more baskets." He said, "Watch." And she looked at the withies a bit closer. She went, "Oh, it's a little fairyman." She said, "Oh, hello." "Hello," he said. And they sat there. "Would you like a cup of tea?" Tea was made. They sat there. The fairyman said, "I want your husband to make me a basket, a little cradle for the fairy lady. But he can't find withies small enough, thin enough. But madam," and he bent forward and he plucked one of her hairs. And it stiffened. He said, "Would that do?" And the basket maker said, if you could make me an armful of those, I'd those. And he looked at the wife and he said, the little ferryman looked at the wife and said, could I pluck some more of your hairs, please? She said, yes, you can, she said. Bing, 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 bing. Zzz, zzz, zzz. And quite soon he had a little bundle. The basket maker, travelling massive. That'll do, he said. And the ferryman said, make me a little cradle, he said. Bring it back to where you've been cutting. He said, there's a stump there. He said, leave it there. If we like it, we'll take it and we'll reward you. Thank you, said the ferryman was gone. Well, the basket maker, he sat there and he kind of woved. You can see I haven't done basket making, can't you? He wove this, those of you who can read baskets, you'll see that my hands don't know what they're doing, but you know, he wove this cradle with a little hood on it. He even made 2 little rockers for it. It was the finest piece of work he'd ever done. It was beautiful. His wife said, I think I've got a little piece of silk. I'll make it like a little blanket for it. Good idea, said that. So there she was, kind of snipping and sewing away, and he went outside to gather some more wood for the fire, and she finished this off. And she said, a baby. She went into her little purse and she got a little silver footprints, and she put it underneath the blanket. She thought, the baby. Well, he picked it up, took it down the lane the next morning, found the stump that he was talking about, an old tree that had been felled a long time ago, and he put it on there. He thought, cut some more withies, got himself an armful. He went back home, and he spent the day making baskets and what have you, because that's how they had to earn their money that time of the year. Next day, he went back down there, had a look. It was still there. It's the finest thing he'd ever made. It was beautiful. He thought, the fairies, it's not good enough for them. And he picked it up, and as he did, he felt something slide. Pulled the sheet back. What's she done? What's she done? The silver threepence. You never give money to fairies from a human. Oh, what has she done? And he went back home. Wife, he said, you gave the fairies money. She said, well, it's a baby. It's a fairy baby, wife. Of course, we don't give money to fairies, do we? I just had baby in my head and I just wanted to give a little coin. And she said, oh, that's why. We'll work something out, he said. Well, the other part of the year, he would do things with tin and with metal and all manner of things. And he had a little bellows, a little foot bellows. And he got a fire going, he kindled the fire, and he got the bellows going. He was going, it was hot enough. He got his little his pincers, and he got hold of that little silver threepence, and he put it into the fire. As soon as it was hot enough and red enough, he took it out on his anvil. Ding, ding, ding. Like that again. Ding, ding. He snipped some bits, and he kind of folded and he soldered on, and he made this beautiful silver butterfly. And he said to his wife, I need a pin. Have you got a pin? And she went into her little tin and she got those buttons and all manner of things that are in there for years that you never use, but they're always there. We've all got one, haven't we? Or 2 or 3 actually, but we only got one at home. But anyway, so and she found a little, and she put this to it, and he said, perfect. And he soldered that on, and he clipped it into the top of the little baby's crib. That's beautiful, isn't it? A purple blanket, beautiful silver butterflies. I'm sure they'll accept this. He took it down to the lane and he put it on the stump. He cut himself some withies with that knife. Such hard work. It was so blunt and so old, and it would make his hands sore from the splits in the handle. And anyway, he got a handful and he went back and made some more baskets. The next day, went down the lane, looked on the stump. They like it, he thought. And he didn't think about anything from the fairies at all. And he cut himself some more withies, and he turned to walk. And as he did, the sun had got up, and there was a ding. He looked and he went over, and there was a penknife, mother of pearl handles, silver rivets. And he opened that blade, and it was the finest, sharpest, shiniest steel that you ever did see. He tried it on a withy, went through like it was butter. Oh, this is amazing, he thought. And he took it home and he showed his wife, and she was as pleased as anything with it. Well, day after day, he was cutting withies, and it was the best knife. It took a wonderful edge when it needed a new edge. Well, his son grew up to be a basket maker, and he gave that to his son. And his son had a son, a grandson, and he handed it on to his son when he was old enough. And as far as I know, that knife is still being passed on from father to son. That's the story of the basket.
When we were in Marrakech, there was for the first festival, it was a bit anarchic, to say the least. So we were trying to arrange people to go to schools for every day, and then we suddenly realised we didn't have, and then someone else would ring up and say, we need 3 tellers for a university down the road for 9 o'clock in the morning. And by this time it was 1 o'clock in the morning. And there's only one person I dared ring up at 2 o'clock in the morning. Can you get down the square? Sarah Lloyd winner.
Okay, I'm really sorry, I don't sit in chairs. It's very difficult. I find it difficult sitting down. I do have a connection, and I hadn't thought about it. So my great-great-grandfather, who my mother knew, was the Deputy Chief Constable for the Forest of Dean, called Donald McCrae. And when he finished, when he retired, there was a story that we really have to investigate, that he went to South Africa to bring somebody's son back who'd been accused of murder. But that's a story we have to find out. But there are pictures of Donald McCrae on the back of a horse when Victoria was gallivanting around the countryside, you know, on one of her jubilees. It must have been the last one. And he looks a lovely man. And my mother said he was. Anyway, they lived not here, but in Cheltenham. So that's my vague connection, apart from the fact that we used to always come up through here. When you went from Weymouth and you drove all the way up to the Lake District, you came through here until they got motorways. Now we go to Marrakech, and this tonight is for Marrakech. And so I thought I would tell the story, the very first story I told in Marrakech. So I got to Marrakech on a Sunday afternoon, and somehow I was escorted from where I was to the School of Storytelling, a beautiful place, and they were having this lovely introductory afternoon with everybody telling a story, and John looks round, as he does, and goes, Sarah, you're next. And I think, I have just got off a plane, I don't know what I'm doing. And I get there and I think, oh my goodness, and these people, they are regal storytellers of Marrakech. I'm just some 2-bit storyteller from the UK. Nervous? No, terrified. So you revert to a story that's in your soul. So this is my story. There was once a king who liked a good puzzle. And everyone knew. So one day they sent him a wooden box. And inside the box were 3 little statues. And on top was a label that said, tell the difference. Oh, he liked a puzzle. So he got each of them out and it spent ages. You know how you do. Are their smiles the same? Are their ears the same? They're dressed the same. They look the same. They look very similar. And he couldn't tell the difference. He really couldn't tell the difference. And so by about lunchtime, he was bored. Because even a king who likes a puzzle likes to solve the puzzle. So he closed it. He called for help. And his first help, librarian, come on, librarian, you tell me. Librarian came in, books under the arm. I have a brain the size of a planet. You want me to tell the difference? Drop the box, open the box. Facts, he said, facts is what you need. So he got each of these little statues out and he measured them. If you were in school, I'd ask you what they were measured with. And the children eventually work out it's a ruler. And then he weighed them, of course. They were all exactly the same. They were the same height, the same weight. And then he did the thing that you shouldn't do with possibly antique statues you've just been given. He scratched a little bit off each, you know, testing the fabric. So he boiled it up in one of those lovely test tubes with a Bunsen burner, which probably you're not allowed to use anymore. But yes. And it boiled up and it reduced down, and then he tested it. Each was exactly the same. By this stage, the librarian had been away from his library for hours. He slammed the lid closed. He picked up the books and he stumped off. Well, the king was no nearer the solution. So he looked and he said, "The fool! If I can't have the most intelligent person in the palace making the choice, I will have the most ignorant. Fool!" And in came the fool, the only man who could make jokes about the king, the only person who could laugh at his smelly feet. And in came the fool, thinking, "Oh, I've got a task on here." And the king said, "Tell the difference." Looked at him. "You want me to look in a box and tell the difference between these?" "No." "Yes," said the king. So the fool wasn't really impressed. He opened the box. "They look the same." He got mad. He rubbed them a bit. "They feel the same." "I know, I'll juggle." Because you know you can tell the difference when you juggle, because they all have to be the same weight. So he juggled. "Oh yes, sir, they feel very similar," he said. Picked them up, put them back in the box and said, "Well, that was that." Closed the lid and went off he went off. The king was now in despair. I mean, puzzles are all very well, but you have to have a solution, otherwise you get bored, especially kings. So in despair, he called the only person he knew who could sort things. He called for his storyteller, and she came in. And she opened the lid and she looked. She smiled. She got the first one out. And she went up to the king. She pulled the bristle from his chin. Look! And she took the bristle. She pushed it into the ear of the statue and it went in. And it stayed in. She picked up the second one and she went to the king's chin and she pulled the bristle. Good chin bristle. And she pushed it into the ear of the second one and it went in. And then it came out. Knock, 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 knock. She picked up the third one. She went to the king. And she took the most exquisite bristle ever. Not that I'm carrying favour. And she put it into the ear of the statue and it went in. And then it came out the mouth. And then it twisted into a knot. She said. And she put them down. I could tell the difference, she said. The first one is like the librarian. The bristle, like the facts, went in, and stayed inside. The second one, it's like the fool, you know, in one ear and out the other. No, those. Now the third one, That is like the storyteller. Well, it went in the story and it came out the mouth, but it always has a knot. Because every time you tell it, and I've told it once today, it is certainly different. She got it back in knots. Why did it came? The Queen of Storytellers.
Well, I love your get out of jail free card. Well, we're going to take a short interval now, allow you to, those that aren't driving, to have alcoholic beverage, and those that are, have more elderflower stuff, or a hot drink, but it's available down there. Lovely, thank you. We'll just take a few minutes.
Sorry, recording around about the phone. I'm so really silent
I've just retired from being a university lecturer, and I can tell you what it's like when your phone goes off and you've said to the students, get off your phones, no phones, and then your phone goes off.
night mode, silent.
Yeah.
I thought if I put it in the gallery up here, if it did actually ring, we would hear it down here, and I'd have to scramble up. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm Rob. I'm the one you meant to customers.
Hi, I'm Alistair. I'm running the gallery. I'm the convener for the gallery. Not really the team running it. I'm the convener. So, yeah, it's not. I'm just there. I'm just sitting it. Normally, it's like for 9 hours battery. Restart it. Normally, so I need some power.
New sound.
It's all on the floor. It's not the question, what's the capital of rats? I know the answer. I don't know that story.
What we don't know, I do as well. At the end, it's we have to tell the story to
To check that we've got right, so we need to.
Yeah, because actually when I said she comes in, that's when somebody who never met me before
That's two.
because in that room, all storytellers were men. And that was
Oh, I thought you were going to talk to me.
yeah, that's exactly right. Because that's what you like. Well, I won't
Sorry, can I
take
just
that.
squeeze through?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Because
No.
the thing is that that he won't keep himself. Here's the story for everyone.
I didn't take a photo of you, so I was listening to your story. I was so listening to right, we'll post one. We'll post one because I was so listening to the story, I completely forgot. No, I've never heard that. And that's the problem with going in a storytelling evening, is sometimes I just sit there and they go,
That's the one I.
then I have to pose it later.
No, that's the first one I told today. to say that's what a storyteller does.
It's brilliant. I absolutely love it. Can we just check the powers on the powers on? Right, let's pose a story. Pose a photo.
Made brownie downstairs as well.
Oh, yes, that's a brownie.
Freshly made. Yeah.
Excuse me, could you two just sit down? Because I forgot to take any photos of this storyteller, and I could really do with two heads in front of her. So if I could get back to your heads, and then I was listening to her story. Sorry, can you just lean forward a bit?
Now I'm ready to look.
I was so entranced by her story, I forgot to take any photos, which is very
And I
annoying.
went to the sensory, I love the story of the hair.
You're okay.
With the silver hair, with the ears sticking up, and the hair is sitting on top of the hill,
Oh,
bathing.
I'm just going to do one thing first.
That's the story of another
Thank you. Sorry, I'm so embarrassing. We do this on a storytelling club, and I take photographs. Sometimes I just get so carried away. Well, it's a good sign, isn't it? If you're getting excited about what you're watching. Let me find the Henna GoFundMe link. Zoom room.
Oh, no, not that one. Oh, not that one. We were doing one inspired by the medieval war paintings.
A cup of brown tea.
Yeah,
So you're going to
we live on the road.
The hedgehogs were being accused of stealing the milk from the cows. Because they were like,
I'm not sure if this one is a. Is it this one is a local?
It's wide beam.
Oh, nice.
So,
Yes.
they're nice to live in. And they're warm as well as central heating.
And does a paper
Well, we're not going to now. We started in 2016.
it's beautiful.
We've sailed all around the White Horse.
Yeah, they came soon, like, last year I did one
Down to Nottingham, on our way north.
Next day after I said I really, really
There's two rounds. The reason I can think is because I different hills. And then people start. Very So she's talking about I can't stop thinking about it when you were telling your story.
My oldest twin.
So you know,
Well, I know about it.
Yes, I do.
That's my passion. So wistful.
do you know what a hedgehog tastes like?
I have been
A bit like a squirrel.
Very.
Oh, yeah.
Every time you pick a hedgehog, you pick up a rabbit.
Did you go to the,
So you put it in a plastic bag.
Just the t-shirt all right up to you.
When I was a kid, the hedgehogs used to come in.
And also,
and
I'm
go
really
in the
warm.
She was sad, she had to hedgehogs, and I was sad, I really wish we had hedgehogs. And like literally the next day, my youngest baby, she was like, there's a tiny watermelon, actually off in the garden. I was like, Serena, somebody's gone off or something, I don't know. Right now, there was this massive ditch. She stopped.
Didn't see her in action, even though they made it.
Really?
She doesn't stop.
She's just like a sprite. She's just as well. I went to the library and someone books about things. And I just went like,
I don't think she's not mistaken. Yeah, in between, up in the green where people generally calm down. You see them chatting about other things. Like couple, she doesn't stop. She's the same until the which meant that I get time for time, which is fantastic. No, when I was dairy free, we were talking about what you get served when you've got dietary things. So when I was dairy free, so news, and how she got out what flight and other things. Other people you get a chance?
Because I think she'll be like, "Need to get to the
My last
Take
Oh, wait, so bad.
No, I saw
In
Yeah.
bags, we flew and kicked one of the other passengers on the head. I'm really sorry, it's like, it's like we're
We've got friends with great tolerance, and when his birthday barbecue, his partner gave him a coffee shop, and during the party he had his first birthday. This is before the market was great, and I've never seen anybody so
We were so excited, I was like,
I did a voice workshop at church at the weekend, and Paul, he made buns, but he also made apple pastries with spiced apples using gluten-free vegan pastries. Absolutely amazing. I had no idea. Delicious. Really delicious. Things have changed. May not be enough, but
so Alaric said he found a good ready made.
yeah.
So I was thinking there's like, I'm running the Halloween market,
Right.
and they've got the apple festivals, so I was like.
Ah, well, with the spice, they went quite quickly.
Yeah.
Right.
What's the name of the
Rachel. Rachel.
My friend Susie said, if I see the picture, I've got to remind them that they were friends.
Yeah.
When she came over by herself, I need to. They all came past.
I'm trying to remember my itineraries.
And she looked back and I know she won't, but it's right. She does leave there and got that.
So, what's Rachel the first
Are you
mission?
going to be doing stuff at the fairy fair again, or?
I don't know.
It's my
When she got together, Bishop from the
He volunteered sort of stuff, because I was just talking to them, and then it turned out like I was on the email list and stuff like that. No, so I think we just need it for a reminder.
We still got.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, I still don't do stuff, but like somehow, even though I filled in all the forms, like, I still yeah, no, I've done the forms 3 times, so 1 online and 2 physical. So,
Take photos.
the lady who's doing
Put the camera near me.
she says she's sorting out volunteer rotors and that, so
Next Wednesday.
The next week I'm being.
Sometimes I'll take it on to working for like several months. Mine was on the school. There was nothing great. And then suddenly. Yes, I mean, to be fair, it's my own company. So I had to do stuff. So I just spent like the last year going, I'm around. Yeah. So it's just been a while for me to realise it was my own
I'll give you a ring later. And then Dave Prince told me about this. Yes, yes, yes. And that can as well, yes.
That's fine, it's 6:06. If I can probably leave it and pick it up tomorrow. Wow. I just didn't want it around the.
There's one son school when I was in South Africa.
This weekend was the fabric clothing sale. Yes. Because obviously my entire living room is literally needed in fabrics and clothing. Things that
Yes, yes, yes.
I didn't, and like, because the last time my mum picked because normally she used to make my dresses, and then she was too good, so she was like, I'll buy you dresses. She didn't actually get to buy this one, but she'd already got it like picked out, so I was like, I'm gonna buy it anyway.
All right, yes, after the initial panic, everything is fine. Everything is fine. I've even got a cup of really good tea, so.
Yes, you're all right.
Yeah.
Some people came on as well. They were like, you know, we can't go out. So the rest of the world thinks that they're being locked in.
Sorry, I missed that one.
Oh, we can, yeah.
You're here?
Yeah.
Claire? Claire? I've sent you the email. Oh, actually,
You first.
So there's been an earthquake in Morocco, so this is an event too. Now my grants have general idea
Sorry. Just because we're going to start a story time in Marrakech, or some friend of mine was, and he asked me if I'd help. And then COVID hit, so we started the World Storytelling.com website that we ran out of Marrakech. And COVID started storytelling. We've done 2 storytellers. So we had 60 so Marrakech, we were supposed to have that lockdown. I've had a good last year.
Order. Get my people to talk to your people.
Yeah, no, my people will talk to the people that talk to her people. Right, is that
No,
okay?
we have said, John, we don't call them servants anymore, it's team.
Team.
We don't call it team.
Okay, right. I believe I used that word in my last email. Right, that's all right. We're here for the stories, not for banter. Anyway, so there's I'm not quite sure how she's going to do the winter shorts behind a mask. We started the first half with music, so I thought we should start the second half. Oh, no, yeah. I thought it was music, but then I'm toned down.
Proper music.
Yes, but now, Claire Goodall. Could you welcome Claire Goodall?
They're doing God's work. Took a long time to think what I was going to tell, because I'm one of the storytellers. There's several here who've been to both of the Marrakech festivals, and I heard so many stories. Then I was thinking, should I tell a story I heard there, because I heard so many, and I heard a lot of stories I never heard before, but I also heard a lot of stories I had heard before. But as Sarah said in hers, every time a storyteller tells a story, it's a different story. And it then made me think, because the highlight for me of both festivals pretty much was working in Henna Cafe with the students who were learning English. They were lovely, they were gorgeous. So Henna Cafe is not merely a soup kitchen, also houses an English school. It's a marvellous thing, and I really hope it gets back to
it was set up as an educational, that's what it's set up for, and it changed because of,
yeah, so it's an I can't tell you, I couldn't tell you. But how lovely it is to tell tales. I told them tales, they told me tales, we made up a story together. And one of the stories I told there has elbowed its way to the front. And that's because I have a personal connection to it. And it's a story you all know, because it's set in a town called Hamlin. And my grandfather was stationed in Hamlin after the Second World War. My mother spent a while there. So she ran around the hills, she went down the river, she explored the caves, and she told me all about it. So this is the story I told in Marrakech to the students learning English. I'll tell. Because, as everyone knows this story, Hamlin had a problem. Hamlin was a beautiful town. It was on a hill. It was green. It went down to a river. It was verdant. But it was also covered in rats. Covered in rats. If you opened a cupboard, there was a rat. In every basket of food, there was a rat. You went to bed, there was a rat. If there was a baby, you had a rat baby as well. Whatever you did, no matter how intimate, you had a couple, at least a couple of beady, ratty eyes. Or lots of people couldn't bear it anymore. We are covered in rats. Everywhere there's a rat. We have nothing but rats. And there were so many rats that the dogs were being chased by the rats. The cats were being chased by the rats. And eventually had a meeting. And they said, what are you going to do about the rats? You are the leaders of the church and you need to sort out this rat problem. And the leaders said, what are we going to do? We have tried everything. We put a trap down. They just walk around it. If we put poison, they eat the stuff that isn't poison. We have tried everything. And suddenly, from the back of the room, there was a voice that said, well, you haven't tried. And everybody looked round, and there at the back was a tall figure, a piper in pied clothing. Now, the thing is today, people don't know what pied is anymore. Pied means multicolored. And back then, when this story took place, The reason you wore multicolored clothing was that you couldn't afford to make your clothing from whole cloth. Your clothing was made from the rags that other people had thrown away. It meant that this person was not just a stranger, he was poor. And normally, poor strangers aren't welcome anywhere. But these were desperate people. They wanted to go home and not have a rat watch them do it. And he said, you haven't tried me. I tell you, I can get rid of every rat in this town, but it'll cost you 1,000 guilders. Now, this is a large amount of money, but Hamlin's rich. It's pretty well off. They can afford it. And everyone started to scream, for every rat, if he gets rid of every rat. But nobody gets rid of every rat. Perhaps if he got rid of most of the rats, then we don't have to pay him. No one's got no rats. I know, forget him. Yes, we'll make the deal. He can get rid of them. Try to get rid of them, and we won't have to pay him because he won't get rid of all the rats. And the burger said, yeah. On the condition you get rid of every rat. And then we'll pay you your 1,000 guilders. And the Pied Piper, that's fine. So he stood and he walked up the hill. He walked up to the top of Hamlin. He walked up to the hill, and at the top, looking down to the river, he got out his pipe and he started to play. The rats came out dancing to the tune, and all the people, their feet were moving, but they could resist it. The rats could not. The rats were dancing to the tune as he made his snaking way down the hill. The rats went behind him like a flood, growing, streaming out of the houses. As each time he went down, every step there was another rat, and every rat danced. And they danced, and they danced, and they couldn't stop dancing. And the people followed this flowing rat, the river down the hill. And the piper got to the riverside. And with the rats dancing behind him, he put one foot in the river, another foot in the river. And he walked until the river was up to his knees. And the rats still danced in the water, danced because they couldn't not dance. They danced and danced until they drowned. And so the people went up the hill. They went up the hill to every house in the hill, and they looked in the baskets. There was no rats, there was no baby rats, there was no rats of any kind. They looked in the beds, there was no rats. Nowhere in the whole of Hamlin was there even a baby rat. They were all gone. And the people were pleased at start, but then it suddenly occurred to them, they're going to have to pay 1,000 guilders. And 1,000 guilders is a lot of money. Well, they can afford it. But it's a lot of money to give a stranger in pied clothing. And they looked at this man, they looked at him, and they started to whisper. I bet he sent the rats here. I'd say it's him. He sent them so he could charge us. And you know, I bet if what's the name of the villages, I bet they've had scams too. I bet there's stories of Pied Piper. I bet everyone here has got a story. I bet there's some still. In fact, I think I've heard a story. Didn't you hear a story? I heard a story. There's a stranger coming in. There was a murder. Did you hear about the murder? Yes, I heard about the murder. I bet he did it. And the burger of Hamlin turned to the Pied Piper and said, I think you ought to go. Because you did us a favour, we're not going to tell the other villages you're here. We're not going to let them know that you committed that murder and you stole all those things. We're not going to tell them. We're going to just let you go. And I think you ought to go now. And the Pied Piper nodded. This wasn't the first time someone had cheated him of what he was owed. And it wouldn't be the last. He was a stranger. He knew nobody. He had no powerful friends. There's nothing he could do to make the people of Hamlin pay what he owed. And he was dressed in rags that other people had thrown away. Is that okay? I can't make you pay. Can't do anything to you. But if you won't pay me the money you promised, I'll take something else. And they said, he's a thief. I told you he was a thief. And they followed him as he walked up the hill. They followed him as he walked back to the top of the hill and again put his pipe to his lip. And I thought, there's going to be more rats. There's no more rats left. I'm going to get cats. I like the cow. And the piper said nothing, but he just started to play. And this time the song was slow. This time the song was sad. And the people of Hamlin found they didn't have to dance to it. They didn't have to move to it. In fact, the adults found they couldn't move at all. But the children could. In fact, the children had to. And the piper went from the top of the hill, slowly snaking down. And the children came out of the houses, carrying those who couldn't walk, following the piper as he slowly came down, passing every house. And the adults went to reach their children, but they couldn't move. And the children, no matter how much they reached, no matter how they tried to get to their child, the child just was always that little bit out of reach. And the piper slowly walked down the hill. And when he got to the river, he turned to the cave. And he went into the cave and was in the cave. The mouth made the sound of his pipe louder. And the children were afraid, found that they weren't afraid anymore. And they followed the piper into that dark, dark, black cave. And suddenly, the adults could move again. There was no more sound coming out of the cave. And they went and they rushed down to the cave. And it was just a dark, blank cave. There was nobody in it. And nobody from Hamlin ever saw either the piper or those children again. And indeed, they'd not had to pay the 1,000 guilders to get rid of the rats, but they found they had paid a much, much higher cost.
That's music. Yeah. Oh, right, okay, yes. Yes, you got a CD or something.
Now, there's been someone sitting behind that desk, and it's been a very stressful evening. We've been trying to we're broadcasting this online, and we had some difficulties. beforehand. But he seems to have recovered. He has some colour back in his Please, can you welcome Alistair K. Daniels?
On this side, rather than back there. I am where World Storytelling Cafe is a place as well as an online presence, and to prove it, I am wearing the t-shirt from the Storytelling Cafe, and I thought I'd share with you the story that I told first. Like Sarah told her story that she told first, I'm going to do the story that I told first when I arrived in Marrakech, and I went to the Storytelling Cafe, and they said, who wants to tell a story? So this is a story, and I'm sorry, Maya, I think you've heard this one. Sarah, I think you've heard this one. Claire, I think you've heard this one. So I apologize now. But here we go. And this is a story from India, and it's from the Panchatantra, which is an ancient Hindu text. Now, people think things like the hare and the tortoise, fox and goose, Aesop's fables. Yes, but actually, before Aesop, they were in the Panchatantra. So this is a story, a very ancient story, but this is how I will tell it to you. And it is called The King's Problem. But before we get to the problem, we have to think about being a king or a queen and this kind of palace we want to live in. So give me some ideas of how we might decorate this palace.
Gold.
Gold, where?
Everywhere.
Everywhere. Everywhere. Well, that leaves very little else for anyone else to say. Isn't it? Gold everywhere. But we'll start with an underlay of gold.
Silver.
Everything. Silver.
Silver.
Well, we've got the gold everywhere. Where's the silver going?
Well, behind the pictures.
Behind the pictures. There's silver behind the pictures. What else?
Sumptuous silks.
Sumptuous silks. Where are we going to have the sumptuous silks?
All round.
Hanging down.
Hanging down. And swags of sumptuous silks. What about the staircases? Go on.
Ivory.
Ivory.
Ivory. It's the olden days.
All right then.
They people treated elephants badly
Okay.
then.
We'll have some ivory. Okay, we'll have some ivory. Where?
Just the odd garnish here and there.
Garnish. A little garnish. Maybe on the end of the stair.
A little filigree.
Okay, filigree. Okay. Yeah, and what's the floors made of?
Marble.
Marble. Okay, staircases.
Ebony.
Ebony staircase. This is a really, I mean, the life of a king is good because you've got a palace that's covered in gold. It's got silver behind the pages. It's got sumptuous silk drapes. It's got marble floors. It's got mahogany stairs. It's got ivory filigree. And on top of that, as a king, you can eat whatever you want, whenever you want. Now, I'm very lucky as a storyteller. In my storytelling career, I've done quite a lot of work abroad. And the thing about going abroad is people always want to give you their national food, and you eat the national food and you enjoy it, or at least you try to enjoy it, even when it's not your normal thing. Even when they present you with something they think is very different, you look at it and go, it's haggis. It really is, it's haggis. But when I get home, I always have the same food, and that is my comfort food. I get home, and when I get home, it's fish and chips. And I always say to when I'm abroad, I say the first thing I'll do when I get home is have fish and chips with vinegar, at which point I go and salt. So what's your go-to food for comfort? I've got fish and chips. So cake. Can we be more specific, or just cake?
Just cake.
Just cake. All right, just cake. Anything else, people? Sausage and mash.
Haggis.
You like haggis? I actually do like haggis. To be honest. I do. I had a haggis and chips last week. Yes. Brioche buns. Now he's saying that because we had a burger at lunchtime and it came in a brioche bun, and I went, "Why does it come in a brioche bun?"
Scratchings.
Sorry?
Scratchings.
Pork scratchings.
And a pint and a pickle onion.
Oh, the sophistication of the cuisine. I hope the international audience is enjoying this. I'm getting a real sense of British food culture.
And your point is?
My point is that if you're the king and you wake up in the middle of the night, you can just lean out of your bed and there's going to be some pork scratchings waiting for you. You know? You go to the loo in the middle of the night and next to the sink there's some brioche buns. Sausage and mash on the way out of the door. Sausage and mash, wasn't it? It was sausage and mash, wasn't it? And as you walk down the corridors, there'd be cakes of different kinds and the smell of haggis wafted down the corridors 24 hours a day. What a life! problem is, of course, if you have food out for 24 hours a day, you're not the only one who's going to be eating it, are you? So if you looked at your mash had little black seeds in it. They weren't black seeds. Your haggis seemed to be sitting in a little pool of clear jus. It wasn't jus. Because if you have food out 24 hours a day, you have mice. And the palace was overrun with mice. And the king said, "This is disgusting. Something has to be done about these mice." And his advisor said, "Your Majesty, if you wish to do something about mice, you need to get a cat." And the king said, "A cat? I'm the king. Fill my palace with cats." So the palace was filled with cats and the mice disappeared. So now the king was really happy that he didn't have any mice. But the problem was
That's the allergy.
allergic to cats. "Something has to be done about these cats," said the king. And his advisor said, "Your Majesty, if you wish to get rid of cats, you need to get a
Dog.
A dog?" said the king. "I'm the king. Fill my palace with dogs." So the palace was filled with dogs. Big dogs, small dogs, long-haired dogs, bald dogs. And the cats disappeared. So the king was really haggis. Pork scratchings. Cake. Sausage and mash. Fish and chips. Have I missed anybody out? Brioche buns. And dogs who can smell food. And as they smell food, they dribble. What was the floor made of? Marble. It was now like a skating rink. Because the food was everywhere and so was the dog saliva. In fact, the king woke up one morning and he thought it was raining. He opened his eyes and leaning over him was a Great Dane, slobbering. The king said, "Oh, this is disgusting. Something has to be done about these dogs." And his advisor said, "Your Majesty, if you wish to get rid of dogs, you need an elephant." Are you feeling bad now? Yeah. "You need an elephant." And the king said, "An elephant? I'm the king." Sumptuous silks, marble floor, gold everywhere, silver behind the pictures, mahogany staircase. Oh, the dogs had gone. Can I just say, I was telling the story to a group of very young children during the school holidays, and I got to an elephant, and this boy went, "Well, that's not a good idea." And I said, "Why not?" He said, "Well, how many floors has the palace got?" I said, "Oh, 3 or 4. He said, "If it's on the top floor, it's going to go through the floor, isn't it?" The king said, "Something has to be done about these elephants." And his advisor said, "Your Majesty, if you wish to get rid of elephants, you need a mouse." And the king said, "A mouse? I'm the king." And so the story goes round and round and round, from mice to cat to dog to elephant to mice to cat to dog to elephant, and I think it will have continued until this very day, unless of course the king worked out that he really didn't need to eat 24 hours a day, or he got some Tupperware. Either way, that is the story of the king's problem, and that was how you and I told it.
Oh. Now, there's leaflets and things around on the chairs, and there's a couple of people here that are responsible for those leaflets. You've heard one, a magnificent hedgehog story. So I think it's only right that you should hear the other perpetrator of this paper chase. Jane Stringham.
Okay, so my story begins. Well, this was a story that was given to me when I was on a course, and it really stayed with me, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I. It begins. Once upon a long ago, between the misty mountains in the west and beautiful birch forest in the east, there was a gentle valley, and right in the middle of the valley was a small but sturdy farmhouse, and it was the home of a farmer and his wife, and they'd lived there for all of their married lives, and they weren't getting on yet. They had seen livestock grow and seen lambs and calves and piglets, and they had sowed crops, watched crops grow and harvested them for many, many years. But for the last few years, things had got very difficult. So difficult, in fact, that one by one they'd had to sell off all the fields that they owned until they were left with just one field that sat in front of their little farmhouse. And what a dry, stony field that was. Now, every day when the farmer and his wife woke up, they were greeted with the rumbling of their stomachs, because they were still hungry from the day before. But they struggled on, until one morning, as the sun rose, the farmer got himself out of bed, stomach, and he looked over at his wife, and she turned over in bed and she said, "I'm so exhausted, I just can't get up today." And the farmer looked down at his wife, who he loved dearly, and he saw how frail she was becoming. It really hurt his heart. He said, "You stay there, you rest today. Tonight I will make us a meal, and it will be a feast for us, and you will feel so much stronger. Stay there and rest." So he left their bedroom and went into the other room of their little farmhouse. He set the fire in the grate, put the pot on to boil some water, and he looked at the largest cooking pot that they owned. "Yes, tonight I'm going to make us a stew, a hearty stew, and that will make my wife feel stronger." And so he stepped into the larder. But when he got there, it was worse than ever. There was virtually nothing left. There were just a few wizened potatoes and a few dry, grey-looking vegetables, virtually nothing to make a stew with. There was a little salt and pepper, but that was all. And the farmer was disheartened. He came back out into the kitchen and he stood and he thought, and at last he realised there was nothing for it. The only thing he could go and do today was that he would go out and he would have to shoot something for the pot. Now, above the fireplace, on the chimney breast, there hung perhaps the oldest, most ancient, possibly antique gun you had ever seen. It was dusty, it looked like a giant old blunderbuss of a thing. But the farmer, well, he lifted it down and polished it up the best that he could. And he went round and round the kitchen, looking in drawers here and there, until he found a small leather pouch that had just enough powder and just enough shot for one day's hunt. He put that in his pocket, slung the gun over his shoulder, picked up a bag that hung behind the door, and stepped out into
into the morning light. And then he set off and he thought, the forest, that's the place to go. So he walked towards that beautiful birch forest and he spent the day looking and literally hunting and searching for something to shoot for the pot. But he saw nothing. He was feeling quite despondent. He could see in the sky that the sun was starting to move towards the west and he had nothing. But he knew it was time to turn for home and he'd have to go home and try and make something from those wizened potatoes. But as he walked towards the edge of the forest, he heard something. It's a beautiful sound. It's music. He looked around. Was there someone hiding behind the trees? But he couldn't see anyone. The music was growing louder and louder. And every moment that it grew louder, filled his heart with happiness. He started to listen. And then as he stood at the edge of the forest, he could hardly move, but he just felt this intense happiness. And he looked up and he saw where the music was coming from. A flock of white, snow white geese were coming out of the forest, flying towards the west. And they were beautiful, and the sound was magnificent. And his stomach rumbled, and he felt his hunger suddenly growing within him. And he knew this was the moment, this was the thing he had to shoot for the pot. So he quickly put some shot and the powder into the gun, and he lifted it up now, it felt heavier than ever. And he watched, bang! And as the geese had all flown by, the last goose was caught, and it started to fall down. It landed on his feet. And the rest of the geese, well, they scattered into the distance. But the music hadn't entirely gone. It was still there, but gentler now. The farmer lifted up the goose from the ground and he felt sad that he'd had to kill such a beautiful creature. But his stomach still rumbled and he knew he needed to give his wife something to eat. So he carried the goose all the way home. And as he walked home, music still played, but it got fainter and fainter and fainter. So as he went through the threshold of the door, stopped. The goose down on the table. His stomach still rumbled. So he prepared the goose as quickly as he could because he knew that it would take a while to cook a whole goose and he wanted to make something for tea for their meal that night. So he plucked the goose and he trussed the goose and then he put it in the big cooking pot and he put the potatoes and the vegetables and poured some water on and then stoked up the fire and put the pot to cook. Well, now, as it cooked, smells that arose from the kitchen was delicious. And his wife even came out of the bedroom and said, "Husband, what have you got for us?" And he said, "I have made us a feast as I promised." And he set the table all beautiful and he brought his wife to the table and they sat down and prepared to eat. He carried the huge pot simmering and bubbling to the table. He got 2 great serving spoons and lifted the goose out and put it on a huge serving platter. And then he went back to the drawers in the kitchen and got the carving knife and a fork. And as he was about to cut the goose, his wife said, "What's that? What's that, husband?" And it was music. Just gently playing. Oh, it's a sad song. But the husband and the wife, they couldn't do anything but listen to the music. And the wife even had a tear running down her cheek. She said, "I remember this song. It's a song from my childhood." They sat and they listened, and the music grew and grew and grew until bang! The windows of the farmhouse opened up inside. Oh, into the kitchen flew the whole flock of geese from before, and they began to circle around the ceiling of the farmhouse. But as the farmer and his wife looked up, it was as if the whole night sky was in the room with them, the stars shining down and the geese flying round and round in stately circles. And then the first goose turned her head and with her beak plucked one white feather from her back and let it drop onto the cooked goose on the table. And then the rest of the geese did just the same. So it was like a snowstorm of feathers falling down on the table until the cooked goose was completely covered. And the music played on and got louder, but now it changed. Instead of sad, it became joyful. And the goose on the table, the cooked goose, began to move, just gently at first. And then suddenly it stood up proud and was a whole goose again and wafted its wings and flew up to join its brothers and sisters still flying around the ceiling. And once it had joined its goose sisters and brothers, whoosh, they all flew out of the window into the night. And the farmer and his wife looked around and noticed. And then they looked in the pot. What was left for them to eat? As they peered into the middle of the pot, instead of just wizened potatoes and vegetables, there were two beautiful golden yolked goose eggs, perfectly cooked. And so the farmer and his wife did have a feast that very night, and I think every night ever after. And the geese, well, from what I heard, they flew off to other times and other tables.
Your storytelling club is on the first Thursday of every month.
Yes.
Here.
In this very building.
In this very building, we use this very chair. Only the Midnight Stories chair that you gifted to us.
Marvellous. Thank you. Thank you. So, it's me. Hold on. 2 seconds, I forgot something. I don't pick it up now, I'll leave it here and lose it. So. I got this in Marrakech, in fact, I bought it, I was leading the parade down for the down the festival. We had a parade through the festival with musicians and storytellers and ambassadors. I was leading it. I had one of the one of the master storytellers, and I just had a really rubbish walking stick with me, and I'd arranged to buy this. So I didn't have quite enough money when I was the day before. So I said to the guy, I said, tomorrow I should be passing by with this parade. I'll pass you. I gave him the money I did have in the pocket. Said, tomorrow I'll give you the balance. And as I slip the balance into your hand, you will slip this in mine. And we did it without losing pace, which was great. And so, like I said, we've done two festivals so far, and we weren't going to do another one until 2005. But then they went and made Marrakech the Islamic city of culture for next year. So we thought, well, we'd better do a festival. It would be rather remiss of us. You know, I mean, we've just won this prize for tourism and got the King's patronage. And so Mike, whose message I read earlier, was in Rabat, attempting to see the Minister of Culture to get some funding for the next festival. And when the earthquake happened, so I wrote this. I thought we'd calculated everything to the last detail, that it was a curveball. I thought our plan was foolproof, but it was a curveball. I thought our emissary would carry our message to the very top, but it was a curveball that came crashing through our and the plans of our whole population, many of whom had no plans beyond making it through till tomorrow, many of whom will never have the chance to plan again, many of whom are waiting, waiting, waiting. Up in the mountains, they are waiting. Below the rubble, they are waiting. Above the rubble, they are waiting. In the streets where buildings still stand, they are waiting for the next curveball. Meanwhile, many sleep in the streets where it is safer and wait for flour to make bread. All this will pass, and like the phoenix, spurred on by brave souls who, though terrified, doubled their efforts, these streets will rise from the dust, and once more the cries of traders, singers, and storytellers, and the call to prayer will ring through this ancient land. I've gone over in November. They'd got the borders open. I went over in November, shook more hands than I'd ever shaken in my life, arranging everything. We got everyone on side, the master storytellers, some really important intellectuals, and then they closed the borders again. And everyone said, "Are you going to cancel?" And we said, "No, if the borders are open, we'll do it." They opened 5 days before the festival. So as a result, we were the first thing that happened probably throughout Africa, certainly in North Africa. And we were in newspapers throughout Africa and Al Jazeera and television stations and everything. And sitting in Essaouira on the coast was Ishmael. And he was sitting in a bus station about to go to his little village on the edge of the Sahara, the gateway to the Sahara. And he read about our festival, and he came to Marrakech instead. And he told me this story about chicken. And there's only the one word you probably haven't heard is, well, those of you who are in Marrakech and all those who heard me tell this story 3,000 times will know Marrakech is a mythical creature, a mythical bird in Morocco. I don't know if it's even through the whole of Morocco. It certainly is in that village on the edge of the Sahara. And that's all you need to know. And there was a chicken. And it had made a little nest that laid its eggs. And it thought everything was ready. But we've all been there. We think we've prepared everything. And then we remember something we haven't done. We think we're going to do it. It'll only take a minute. Nothing can happen in a minute. Well, she went, came back, her eggs had hatched, and there sitting on her nest was an enormous marcouche. She was very polite chicken. She said, "Excuse me, do you mind moving aside so I can look after my chicks?" Marcouche said, "Not at all, not at all. If you go to the cow and get me some butter." So she went to the cow and said, excuse me, can I have some butter to give to Marcouche? The Marcouche will move aside and I can look after my
Chicks.
Keep up,
Keep up. The cow said, not at all. If you go to the alfalfa field and get me some alfalfa. If I'm with children, I have to explain that's what cattle eat in North Africa and it's to put on their salad. And so she went to the alfalfa and said, excuse me, can I have some alfalfa to give to cow? Cow with some butter, I give butter to my couche, inside, and I can look after my chicks. You learn quickly. And the alfalfa said, not at all, but it's really dry here. Could you get the canal to water us? So the canal said, canal, can you walk the alfalfa, field the alfalfa, get the alfalfa, the cow brings the butter, get the butter, the Marcouche moves aside, and I can look after my chicks. And Canal said, yeah, but we're really dirty. Could you get the workers to clean us? So she went to work, said, workers, can you clean the canal, walk the alfalfa, get the alfalfa, the cow, give us the butter, get the butter, my cruise moves like, and I can look after my chicks. Well, I said, yeah, it's really boring here. Could you get the dancers to dance for us? I love that. Just, we ain't gonna work till we get dancers. So she went to the dancers, said, dancers, can you dance for workers? The workers clean the canal, walk the alfalfa, get the alfalfa, the cow, give me some butter, I get the butter, my cruise moves like, and I can look after my chicks. Yeah, it's really stony down by the canal. Could you get the shoemaker to make us some shoes? So she went to the shoemaker, she says, shoemaker can make shoes for dancers, workers clean the canal, walk the alfalfa, get the alfalfa, the cow give me some butter, I get the butter, my crucial moves side, and I can look after my chicks. Shoemaker said, yeah, I'm really hungry. Could you go there? They're cooking some chili couscous down the party down the road. Could you get some? And Ishmael was very concerned it should be chili couscous. So went to park. So excuse me, can I have some chili couscous? The shoemaker makes some shoes for dancers, for workers. The workers clean the canal, walk the alfalfa, get the alfalfa, the cow give me some butter, get the butler, my coach will move aside, and I can look after my chicks. Yeah, but we got no wood for the fire. Chili couscous, can you get some wood? So she went to all her chicken friends, and this is the wisdom of cooperation. So could you each get a piece of wood to take to the party? They'll heat the chili couscous. The chili couscous will be given to the shoemaker. The shoemaker makes shoes for the dancers, for workers clean the canal, walk the alfalfa, give the alfalfa to the cow give me some butter, I get the butter, my cooch will move aside, and I can look after my chicks. Now, you'll be relieved to know, at this point, each of those chickens took one piece of wood in its beak and took it to the party where they heated the which was given to the
Shoemaker.
who made some
Shoes.
for the
Dancers.
who danced for the
Workers.
who cleaned the
Canal.
who watered the alfalfa. She gave back the alfalfa to the
cow.
Cow gave us some
Butter.
She gave the butter to the
Marrakech.
She said, you took your time. Marrakech moved aside, and at last she could look after her chicks. Well, thank you all very much for coming. Thank you out there in virtual land, on the virtual highway. When you pass, yes, when you pass one of those signs that says donate here, and there is one on the World Storytelling website, the donating to the Henna Cafe Soup Kitchen, or if you want to go to the BritishMoroccanSociety.com, .org, BritishMoroccanSociety.org. There, and scroll down, there is the earthquake appeal there. They have provided water purifiers for the for the mountains up in the village, and solar lighting and all that stuff that you need when everything, literally everything, has gone. But thank you very much for coming. Thank you all the tellers for telling.
He's not the only person who gets messages from Marrakech, because I get them as well. And they've always, things like this only happen because of one person. And we're all here because of one person, and he's standing with it. So thanks for all the work you've done.
Oh, There is someone that we need to thank. He's sitting up the back here. He's one of the fantastic fellows.
He's gone home.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we don't
No,
record many.
he's 2 hours later in Romania.
Oh.
It's midnight. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.